So, Thebe, looking at your branding surveys and that kind of stuff, are there countries that get it right in terms of their own branding? I'm asking because I watch Nigerian adverts, and I think it's so easy to tell that this is a Nigerian advert. They're talking to a Nigerian audience, whether in the diaspora or in Nigeria. There's a difference to what all of us do. You go to South African adverts, you even have American accents in South African adverts. You go to Zimbabwe, you also have a mimicking of America and a mimicking of Britain. Are there countries in Africa that are getting it right in terms of being authentic, in terms of owning their brands?
Sure, there are a couple of countries in the continent, I think, to me, which have a very clear sense of identity, and a couple of those to me being Nigeria for one. Let's say that it's probably the proudest, most assertive, and self-understanding country, Nigeria. That's why they can produce more movies than Hollywood, and only second to to Bollywood. And if you look at those movies, they're telling stories in ways that that when you come to Southern Africa, we look at them, we're like, stories about witchcraft. You're like, and you're like, when did they write this plot? Like, this thing doesn't even have a plot. But they're telling the story in a way that people can relate to. But that's...
And Nigerian movies have become very popular on the
continent. Very popular, because, and that's the point I was going to say, that the very people who are looking down on them and laughing at them, you'll catch us in our houses.
Watching them become kittens.
Because you know why? Because we can relate to the stories. It's a slice of life, and that's perhaps at an elementary level. But if you go even further up in terms of advertising and all those, and you see what the work that even a non-African brand like an Airtel does, or an African brand like a Glow does in telecommunications, how they weave the Nigerian culture, how they speak, how they dress, how they walk, and how they in terms of how they tell the story and sell their brands. Of course, they do it in a way that only a Nigerian can do it.
Absolutely.
Those stories are not going to win Cannes Lions.
No,
they're not going to win DNAD in London.
But one day they will.
But I'll tell you why they're not gonna win. They're not gonna win because they're not written to try and please the Western narrative or the Western formula of how a story is written. They are written to please the ears of an African and to sell the products. Fantastic. I think another one is Ethiopia. I think
and Ghana to a certain extent, hey?
Ghana, well, West Africa is an interesting country. West Africa, especially Ghana and Nigeria. Ghana, Nigeria first. I think Ghana second. You're correct to a certain extent. But Nigeria is a flag carrier of the continent in terms of our identity and all those. And Ethiopia will certainly be another one. They speak their own language. They write in their own ways. They learn in their language, whereas most of us learn in English and then have to reverse back into our.
And when we do, we still look down upon our languages.
Whereas they celebrate who they are, and then also, but also, what's also interesting is East Africa, Tanzania versus Kenya.
Yeah.
So Tanzania is amazing. I was quite impressed, excited that when the president speaks, they speak in Kiswahili. It's not my problem that I don't speak Kiswahili.
No.
I am in Tanzania.
Yeah.
So I must learn, because when we go to France and Macron speaks in French, we don't say, we go, oh, wow. And we sit there with our translators trying to relate to him. So we do the same thing. So
we must get to, who is Thebe Ikalafeng? Where were you born, Thebe? And where did you go to school?
So I was born in Kimberley. Kimberley is where the diamond rush started. So obviously, selfishly, I like to tell people, or rather pompously, I like to tell people, we created South Africa. because our money, our diamonds built the most prestigious institutions and the first foundational corporates of South Africa, the Anglo, the Beers, and all those, So born in Kimberley. the oldest of 4 children, but I was raised by my grandmother, passed away many years ago, 30 years ago, and 20 years ago rather. And so that's where I was born. My mother's a nurse. I was telling my mother the other day, because I never knew my father, but there's 4 of us. I never knew my father. But like a typical and a beautiful African story about our African women, our mothers and our grandparents. They never ever made you feel lacking on any of those. And they never ever made you feel less because of those. So that's where I was raised, in Kimberley.
They say you can tell a person was raised by a grandmother. They are amazing people. They're loving, they're compassionate, and so forth. And I can see that.
My grandmother was a great woman. She was she walked fast. We'll go every holidays. We get into a train to go visit my mother, and she'll pack dumplings and a flask full of pancakes and flask full of coffee, and we'll brace the cold in the winter in trains 4 hours to go to see my mother, who was a nurse in Bloemfontein. So that's what I am.
Which schools do you go to?
So I started school I stayed in one yard. St. Boniface, which is a Christian Brothers school in Kimberley. And what's interesting about Christian Brothers school is it's a Christian Brothers school in the cusp of a township and a white suburb, and Indian traders. So it's a very interesting story that we live in a township. School is right here, right next door. Not as in you have to cross borders, as in across the road is a white neighborhood, and across is my black neighborhood. So you're going from the have to the have-nots, served by Indians who ran the shops in our areas, taught by Irish priests and Christian brothers, if you call it, brothers as we call them, that's where I went. So I went from creche to primary to high school.
Wow.
And I think I always like to tell my friends, some may disagree, some I'm sure, but I was top of my class for as long as I remember. And in many ways it generated a self-belief that whatever I do, I must be top of class wherever and in everything that I approach.
And where does that belief come from? From your granny or?
It comes from stories. Africans were storytellers. So going to school, they'll remind you, your mother was the smartest person in school. She was always top of class. You're just like your mother. Or and
it affirms you.
And it affirms you. And so I think it comes. So and also our parents, our grandparents are amazing people, because they always see better in us. They see greater in us, and they see us. We'll sit around our Dover stove, our coal stove, and she'll regale our stories, and she'll tell us, when you grow up, you're gonna take me places. You're gonna look after me. They named me Thebe Ikalafeng, which means the shield has arrived. The one who's going to, and I was the first grandchild, which my grandmother says, you're the one who's going to uphold our name, because being born out of wedlock with a non-existent father, you take the mother's name, the grandparents' name. So you're the one who's going to uphold, keep the name going, or certainly, hopefully, hoist the name.
And then you went to Wits, did you?
So then I went to Wits, but I left Wits. I dropped out of Wits to go to the US. I was one of, I think, 2,000 applicants, and 80 only received scholarships. It was those days when there was a lot of opportunities for black South Africans as sort of the lead up to the opening of South Africa. There was a lot of opportunities to go study overseas.
Interesting that you never wanted to do marketing. You looked down upon marketing.
Well, I thought
marketing was for?
Well, I thought because I went to Wits to study accounting, because my former head boy at school was there, and he'd gone to do accounting, and accounting is for smart people. Accounting. And
your former head boy is doing it, therefore you're going to do it.
And I was top of class. I was head boy. I must do accounting. I can't be doing silly things like marketing. It's not for smart people. Because it's just.
But look at you.
But then when I arrived in the US, and I met as Busiso Khadebe, I saw rest in peace. He'd been at Wits as well. I met him in a nightclub in Columbus, in Ohio, Columbus, and he says to me, Thebe, you here? Because at Wits I was well known for some silly reason. I mean, I was not a politician and all those, but I arrived at Wits very well affirmed, knowing who I am, standing my ground. I was never part of a clique. So I was able to weave from multiple.
I tell you that story to me is important in terms of affirming a lot of people that are out there. You don't know who your father is up to now. You're raised by a grandmother. But there's a lot of us walking around. I'm doing this because I don't know who my father is. I was raised by my grandmother rather. My parents were never there for me, and they are broken. But here you are, complete, knowing who you are, with this kind of background.
Because I think also it's how you look at your life and what you look at in your life. So if you focus on the negatives in your life, then they begin to define who you are. So if you look at the positives of there's food on the table, there's love in the house, there's opportunities to do things, those things are what should matter and how you should define yourself. But a lot of us define ourselves about what we don't have. We define ourselves about the negatives that surround us. And I'm not going to be presumptuous and say that everybody should be able to do that. But I would say that I was raised with focusing on the positives around my life, and I was raised to believe that I can achieve anything I can in life. I mean, I'm the guy who starts football and retires at the age of 14 at the top of my capabilities. So when that's how I put it, because I don't say people that I couldn't play football. I just say I retired at the top of my capabilities,
right.
Or is it incapabilities? But I'd move from football. I go to do piano. I do tennis. I do sprinting. I do chess. And every time I move, I was supported. So every time my mother would always just say, so we are now doing tennis. I'm like, yes. And then I give it up. So what it did for me in many ways, it helped me to find my passions, my strengths, but also it opened me up because every one of them comes with different networks and different places.
It's the openness that you've shown in going all across the continent and
Correct.
being open to learn. Your professional career started when you were 25. With Colgate-Palmolive.
27, actually. 26.
Really?
27.
With
I started quite late because remember I was at Wits, and then in my third year at Wits, I left Wits.
I see.
And
so
I
you
arrived
lost
in America.
2-3
and
years.
then Busiso, who was actually telling the story, when I arrived in there and I missed Busiso in a nightclub, he says to me, what are you coming to do here? I says, Busiso, I was in third year at Wits, at accounting. I'm coming to finish my third year here, then I do my fourth year, then I go back as a CA. That's a respectable career. And he looked at me and he says to me, but you don't even look like an accountant.
What?
He says, just look at yourself in the mirror. He says, you should be doing things like marketing.
I'm looking at you. I think you're right. You don't look like an accountant.
He says, you need to be things like marketing. And he says to yourself, and he says
your personality.
Yeah, he says something also important. He says to me, don't worry about what they think about you in South Africa. You are no longer in South Africa. You are in America. And he says, nobody here knows you. So he says, take time, don't rush, do something that comes natural to you.
I'm sure when you look back, you don't regret that decision, isn't it?
Well, I mean, by my fourth year, by my third year, I did my 4-year degrees in 3 years. Started everything, gave up everything I did at Wits and started a whole new. That's why I started working late. That's why I started working late because I now restarted this thing in a completely different way and in a liberal arts college at Marquette in Milwaukee. And my third year, which is fourth year for everybody else, bumped into my professor Robinson. He was going up the stairs. It was the last semester, and he was going up. I was coming down, and he stopped me. He says, "Thebe." I said, "Yes, prof." He says to me, "Oh, you're going to be an amazing marketer." I was like, "This one is probably smoking something." And he says to me, "Anyway, I will see you on Saturday at the awards." So it was the end of the fourth year program, 3 for me, thingy. And then I was named the best marketing student by the American Marketing Association chapter of Milwaukee. I was like, oh,
And you went on to shine at Colgate Palmolive.
So
Perhaps your biggest career move was Nike for Africa. You stayed there for a while, but much more importantly, you won 75 awards in branding and marketing. Very briefly, what were your takeaways from your time with Nike?
This I know very well. When I arrived in South Africa, left Colgate in New York and came to Colgate in South Africa, I felt like I was working for a formula. I was working for a stiff place. There's a certain way people start work at certain at 4:30, everybody disappears and all those things, and the expectations of this is Colgate. Then I arrived at Sun International, and I absolutely hated the product. I said, I hate gambling. I don't understand who gambles, but I went there for the wrong reasons. I went to Sun International because it was a glamorous place. It's all Custer's place. The big world, the world championships, they promote all those. Then I discovered that I absolutely hate the product. And when I didn't get a job at SAB Miller, and I asked them, why didn't you get a job? And they says, because you don't drink. And I said, oh, but then that's a very good reason you should hire me. No, I said, it's a good reason you shouldn't hire me because I'm not going to drink just to get the job. I learned a few things about those jobs. I learned which Nike resolved, which is you must love the product. You must know yourself. Because when I didn't get the job at Southern Sun, and I went I went for interviews, not at Southern Sun, with a headhunter. And the headhunter then said to me, I'm not going to recommend you to go to Southern Sun. I said, I'm 28. I need to drive a BMW. I need to live in a beautiful house. You have just taken away my opportunities. You know, the things we talked about, how we define ourselves. And he says, I said, why can't you recommend me? He says to me, because you're too entrepreneurial. He says you are very assertive, and you want to be in the driving seat. He says you are better in an environment where you are getting things done and you are leading. So when I arrived at Nike, it was a 26 million rand company. It was only in the country for 6 months or so. It was 25% owned by Nike International and 75% by Standard Bank and Ndabanzele, Solistole, and they were the B. I can't remember the B part. I was just called because they were the owners of the bigger part of the place. So I went into a place which didn't have a formula in the country.
So you could be creative.
It's a place that allowed me to be myself. And I learned that and for me, for any career, for anything that we do in life, you must go to a place which unleashes your energies, which makes you excited, where you wake up every morning and say, I'm going to make a difference. Because when I arrived at Nike, I then gave up all my other interests and ambitions. Because you know, when you're young and 28, 29, you start saying to yourself, oh, I'm going to start my own company, I'm going to do all those things. When I arrived there, I said, here is a place where, or the clean canvas, where I can recreate and redefine what it means here. I had lots of running battles with the Nike International. And they always used to say when they see me in London, see me in Amsterdam, they see me in Portland, they said to me, how do you do it? How do you win so consistently? Yet you are not following the Nike formula. You're only following the Nike values and the positioning, but you're doing things differently. I said, because I'm not a sheep. I said, because I didn't get hired to just fulfill a role. I got hired to create success. So I think what worked at Nike for me was that it's a place that matched me where I was and what I was capable of.
Fascinating. And then you've gone on and established Brand Africa.
And brand leadership. So first I started with brand leadership. Brand leadership as my consulting firm and through brand leadership. And when you started brand leadership, it was the first indigenous African-owned branding agency, because all the branding agencies were not indigenous Africans, and all of them were part-owned by international companies, and we were just us. No clue about consulting, zero clue about zero relationships, zero grandfathers, zero money. So we defined ourselves, and it also part of what helped the later journey in Brand Africa, because what through brand leadership, I then started saying to myself, a friend of mine, Karen Duchenne, whom I've known now for 35 years, and she said to me at once at Brandship, early in my Brandship career, and said to me, don't chase doing work with the Cokes and all those things. He says, because those are institutional brands. They do things a certain way. You have to follow into. Says you are not going to make a difference. You may make money, but you may not make a difference. And I knew what she meant, because when I went to an interview with Coke just before I left Nike, and the chairman and everybody else thought this is the guy. The guys in London, in Atlanta, everybody thought this is the guy. And I had coffee at the last meeting with the chairman of Coke, Doug Jackson, and we're sitting like this. It was that culture meeting where you sit and you meet with somebody to try and understand. And he says, and we talked about Coke, and he said to me, and Coke at that stage was in trouble, certainly in a lot of the world. It had lost its je ne sais quoi, as I say, what makes that thing that makes Coke, and Coke everywhere asking themselves questions. How do we redefine Coke? And I remember Doug, I think, said to me, "Oh, what are you gonna do when you come here to Coke?" I think I said to Doug, "Oh, Doug, I think when we come here, we're gonna rethink everything." I said, the things you make doing are just not working.
Yeah,
it's gonna start. We're gonna start on a clean slate.
You frightened the man.
So guess what happened? So I didn't get the job, and then the headhunter out in London called me, and they said the feedback from the chairman was, he's a maverick. He's going to come here and change things. Coke has been around since 1886. We want people who come to just do things.
And that's not Thebe.
And then Happy Chingela, my friend, who was the agency, he had Herd Boys, and he was one of the owners of Herd Boys, and he was the agency for Coke. I remember I just left the meeting, some other meeting, and he says to me, "Thebe, I heard people were saying that you were going to come to Coke, but I hear that perhaps maybe not." He says, "Let me just tell you, you were going to last 3 months, and you're not gonna do that." So brand leadership, in many ways, then I came to brand leadership, and then I did have another chance, because those early days when you're starting on your entrepreneurial journey, you get a lot of tests. I remember I had a Lungindlov from Vodacom, just the chief human capital, called me and says to me, "Thebe, we love you here. We want to talk to you." So I came to see her. I remember I was wearing jeans because I'd stopped wearing suits at that stage now. And then said to me, "You can make lots of money at Vodacom. It's a big company. Starting salary, you'll be getting like 2 million. This is like 25 years ago, 20 years ago."
Oh, wow. You wouldn't be sitting with me here.
Imagine. And he says to me, "Thebe, you'll be getting like 2 million rand a year." It's really big brand. It's like a defining, it's a step up from your Nike days and all those. And I went back home, and then I was staying on the porch of the office, rather, my office where I was renting. And then I looked and I called Lungi a few days later, or she called me, says, "You haven't given us feedback, whether you're keen to come have a conversation further with us." I said to Lungi, I said, "Oh, Lungi, I won't be coming to Vodacom." I said, "You see, Lungi, I think right now I'm making about 10,000 rand a month. I think it's a lot more than 2 million because I'm now in charge."
Yeah, you're free.
I'm free, and I'm in charge of what I do. But then I learned through brand leadership as well later that when Karen then said to me, "Thebe, start focusing on transformational brands, on brands which change countries, which will change the country, the narrative about the country." It began that part of the transformation of who I am as a person, asking myself, even in work, what type of clients should be working with, what type of brands, which then led later, after doing brand leadership for 10 years, I then started saying that I went to the AU 50th anniversary I think it was 2013, and that's when I affirmed the foundations of Brand Africa, which had started really in 2010 when the world was coming to South Africa. But then 2013, when the AU was celebrating 50 years, and they were asking for another 50 years to try and fulfill the goals which were set 50 years earlier, I said, we are in trouble in this continent because now we've just given ourselves another 50 years and we've rewritten the same things which Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie had committed to doing in a simple 8-point plan, 10-point plan in 1963. Now we're asking for 2063 to create the Africa we want. We know the Africa we want. So I then said, let me take Brand Africa as my next chapter, in addition to what I do in consulting brand leadership, and let me do a non-profit initiative in which I've really poured lots of money into it and brought all these partners and said, let me see if we can lead, if we can lead the renaissance from a branding perspective. I said, see, if we create our own brands, if we champion our own brands, it means we are championing our independence. Because when we create those brands, we are able to inspire Africans to consume, to create and to consume made in Africa, and to find our ultimate independence.
What books have you read that you'd want to recommend to our book-loving audience out there?
So when I was a 26-year-old arriving in New York, 26-year-old arriving in New York, 27 years arriving in New York, 26, I think, arriving in New York. And I met Philip Berry, who was a vice president, first the highest ranking black man at Colgate-Palmolive. He was a vice president, he was 43 years old. And he took a liking to me as somebody can mentor, I guess, in a way. And he took me out to bookshops, and it bought me several books, The Wretched of the Earth, The Richest Man in Babylon, and he says, and I remember saying that he says, you must read these things, just read, it's important for you, Fanon, and then
Wretched of the Earth.
Wretched of the Earth,
yeah.
and then, but mostly The Richest Man in Babylon, which is the one thing I take out of that book is you need to invest in your passions. Which is to me the most important thing, is you need to reward yourself.
You need to pay yourself.
You need to pay yourself
10%
first,
every time.
and then you need to invest in your passions. And that's why, for example, as part of my philosophy, I don't do things that I'm not passionate about. I don't do things that I don't understand. I only do things because true wealth is not measured in rands and silvers.
No.
True wealth is measured for me in happiness and they. So that book is interesting for that. But that's a book from 1926. Remember?
Well, I've read it and I'm rereading it. It's a great book.
So Philip was instrumental in that, and I didn't know why he gave it to me, but then he said I must read that. But much later, probably 96, 94, I watched the movie actually before I read the book, which is Tuesdays with Morrie. And Tuesday, it was a relationship between Mitch Albom and his professor who was now dying.
Right.
And he writes about these 14 weeks that he visited him the 14 weeks before he died, every week, every Tuesday, and met with him. And when he sums it,
what is the book called?
Tuesdays with Morrie.
Tuesdays with Morrie.
Yeah, Tuesdays with Morrie. And I mean, perhaps one could pull 3 things out of it, because how Mitch explains that for an accomplished professor, which Morrie used to be, but is now old and living alone and all those, and he says he realized how much he craves for human contact. How when he says help me here, it's more about how we all need somebody, or we need people in our lives. We need family. So to me, it's an important thing. But also, Morrie taught him as well about forgiveness.
Right.
Because Mitch then writes in the book that and he tells a story later that at that stage I did not have a good relationship with my brother. All those, I didn't realize that I needed to find for to forgive him. And then, of course, I think the final part of that, it's about fulfillment. So the common theme for me around when I look at things is how those books fulfill me. But I guess as an Africanist, as a Pan-Africanist, there's multiple. I mean, we don't write much about our leaders, but Kwame Nkrumah, at least there was an autobiography about him, which I gave mine to KK. Then I had to go buy another one again next time I went there.
Right.
Because quite interesting. I mean, he says, "Oh, can I give me this one?" So the beauty about the story of Kwame and when you go through that is to me it's the humanity or the frailty of humans. So, and the fact that we are not all perfect. I mean, here's a man who fought for the ultimate good for the continent. I was a defining visionary.
Look how it all ended.
Of Pan-Africanism. But there's a man who became a dictator himself, right? And a man then who was then who was dethroned while he was out on holiday. But I think if there's something I do appreciate about that book, about Kwame certainly, is a clear vision for the continent, but also that we are citizens of Africa. Because while he was a president of Ghana and president of Guinea, so when I look at how my travels are and how I define myself, I always tell people, I said, listen, I've got a South African passport, but I'm not a South African.
I'm an African.
I'm an African, and I am home wherever I lay my head in the continent. And people like Kwame make you believe in that.
It can happen.
Because you remember when he and many others were fighting for Africa, he says the continent will not be free unless every single one of us, none of us will be free if all of us are not free.
Oh, Thebe, very important books those. I've not read the Kwame Nkrumah one, so I'll make a point of getting. You are a treasure to the continent. You are an asset to the continent. I think you said when we started that this is a thought-provoking. You've put out a number of issues that we ought to engage with as Africans. We're watching the journey of Brand Africa as you conscientize us about the importance of loving ourselves and looking inward rather than outward. So, Thebe, thank you so much for finding the time to be here. Allow me to tend to our viewers who are all over the world who follow this show on a weekly basis. Remember, we are a weekly show. We come out on YouTube, 7 a.m. Central African time every Monday. To ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations, I invite you to click on this red button and subscribe. When you subscribe, you'll get an alert every time we have one of these quality conversations like the one I've had with my dear brother, Thebe here. We've gone a step further, by the way. We've created podcasts on all podcast platforms. You can scroll down this video and you'll find a link that will take you to our podcast for your listening pleasure. We read all your comments. We invite you to watch and share and give us suggestions as to who you want to see on the show. Thank you for watching. Until next time, cheers to you all.